noticed how sometimes, like, when something really terrible happens, the words we usually use just don't seem strong enough?
Yeah, like trying to describe a hurricane is just a bit of a strong breeze.
Right. There are times when we need a word that carries more weight, a word that reflects the gravity of the situation. And often that word is evil.
Evil. It's a heavy word for sure.
It is. And it's interesting because it seems like we're almost hesitant to use it these days.
Yeah, I see that.
The OED even points out how evil has become less common, replaced by words like bad or harm. But it's not like that everywhere. In Germany, for instance, das Böse, which translates to evil, is still a very present term.
Oh, that's interesting. So it seems like there's a kind of reluctance, maybe especially in like formal or academic settings, to use evil, like badness or suffering feel more, well, manageable somehow.
Yeah, it's like evil shuts down conversation, whereas suffering can be analyzed, measured, maybe even fixed.
Right. Evil has this sense of being impenetrable.
Exactly. But then something happens, some horrific act, something so deliberately cruel that evil doesn't sound so outdated anymore. Like those mass shootings we've sadly become all too familiar with, or the abuse of children.
Sadly, yeah.
Think about how even figures like Trump, after those tragedies, or Bush with his axis of evil, or even Reagan talking about the evil empire, they all use that word.
Yeah, you're right. It's like evil resurfaces when we're confronted with something that feels like a fundamental violation, like it cuts through all the layers of polite language and exposes this deep, instinctive human response.
So in this deep dive, we're not just throwing the word evil around, we're trying to actually, understand it. We've been exploring the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on the kinds and origins of evil. It's dense stuff, but think of us as your guides, helping you navigate these complex philosophical ideas.
We're going to equip you with a set of like conceptual tools.
Yeah, a philosophical toolkit.
Exactly. So you can engage with these, dark aspects of existence, these things that make us reach for that word evil with more nuance.
So what are the key tools in this toolkit? Well, philosophers have made some really important distinctions when it comes to evil. First, there's the question of the kinds of evil. Is evil something woven into the very fabric of reality, what they call metaphysical evil? Or is it always something we experience, something we observe and feel, empirical evil?
Right. And then there's the question of the origins of evil. Where does it come from?
Yeah. Does it come from the natural world, like diseases or natural disasters? Does it come from human choices, what's called moral evil? Or could it even come from something, I don't know, spooky, some impersonal force beyond our understanding?
Almost like a shadow side of reality.
Exactly. And we'll also look at some of the more, I guess you could say, puzzling categories like systemic evil, symbolic evil, and radical evil. There's a lot to unpack here, a lot of twists and turns in this exploration. So are you ready to put on your thinking caps and dive in?
I'm ready if you are.
Let's do it. Okay, first things first. We need to understand the difference between those two initial categories: metaphysical evil and empirical evil.
Okay, so metaphysical can sound a little intimidating.
Oh, yeah. It sounds like something from a philosophy textbook,
Right. But it's really just about the nature of being itself.
like the fundamental nature of existence.
Yeah, exactly. So metaphysical evil in this context is about evil that's connected to the way things exist, or actually how they don't exist in some, I guess, perfect way. It often has to do with the limitations or imperfections that are inherent to things,
Mm-hmm.
and it can feel really abstract, almost like impossible to fully grasp.
Unintelligible.
Yes.
The source material actually gives this really powerful example. Nietzsche, the philosopher, witnessed a coachman mistreating his horse in Turin, and he was really shaken by it.
Oh, wow.
The coachman's illness, his cruelty, the horse's suffering, these are all clearly things we experience in the world, things we can observe, so they're empirical evils.
Wow, we see the effects.
But some philosophers would argue that there's also a metaphysical evil at play here, in the very fact that both the man and the horse are finite, imperfect beings. They're limited in their existence, falling short of some, ideal state.
An ideal of perfection.
Right. And it's this idea of imperfection, of lack, that leads to some of the core theories about the nature of metaphysical evil. One is called the absence theory. It goes all the way back to Plato. And it suggests that reality exists in degrees. The more being something has, the more complete and perfect it is, the closer it is to true goodness.
Almost like a hierarchy of existence.
Right. So in this view, evil isn't actually a thing in itself, but a lack of perfection, a void where goodness should be.
I see.
Like a rock can't think, a plant can't feel emotions. These limitations could be seen as forms of absence and therefore, in a way, a kind of metaphysical evil. Anselm, a medieval philosopher, even used this idea to argue that because God is perfect being and perfect good, evil, as a lack of those things, isn't something God directly created.
That's a clever way to address the problem of evil, especially within a religious framework.
Right. If evil is just the absence of good, then God isn't actively creating evil, just beings that are inherently limited and therefore capable of lacking goodness.
But as the source points out, this raises the question of whether God, by creating beings that are necessarily limited, is indirectly responsible for that lack. It's a tricky philosophical puzzle.
It really is. Then there's the matter theory, which is probably most famously associated with the philosopher Plotinus. He didn't buy into this idea of a hierarchy of being. Instead, he thought that evil comes from our connection to unformed matter.
Non-formed matter.
Yeah, he saw it as the lowest level of reality, the most chaotic and formless, the furthest from the realm of intellect and pure goodness.
So in this view, it's our physicality, our embodiment in this material world that's the source of our imperfection and potential for evil.
Exactly. It's a much more, grounded explanation compared to the abstractness of the absence theory.
It makes sense.
Next, there's the privation theory, which became super influential thanks to philosophers like Augustine and Aquinas.
Big names in philosophy.
They had theological reasons to be wary of the matter theory because if God created all matter, then how could it be inherently bad?
Yeah, that's a problem.
So their idea was that evil is a privation, a falling short of one's natural purpose or ideal state. Like a diseased organ, the evil isn't the disease itself, but the lack of proper function.
A deviation from the natural order.
Right. And this is interesting because the privation theory often connects metaphysical evil to a possible moral origin. This falling short can come from ignorance, from not knowing what's good, or in Augustine's case, from the effects of original sin, which corrupted human nature.
So it's not just a void, it's a failure to live up to a certain standard.
Right. And then you have Descartes, who focused on the human will as the source of this privation. He thought our will could turn away from the good and choose what's lacking.
A fascinating perspective.
And finally, we have the real property theory. This takes a very different stance. It says that evil isn't just an absence or a lack, but a real feature of some beings or things in the world.
It has a substance of its own.
Exactly. Some versions of this theory see evil as like a shadow of the good, while others, like the Manichaeans, they were an ancient religious group, believed that good and evil were two equal and independent forces fighting for control.
A cosmic battle.
Yeah. Even in this theory, there's this element of, unintelligibility, like evil as something that our reason has trouble fully grasping.
A mystery in a sense.
Yeah. Okay, so those are some of the main ways philosophers have tried to make sense of metaphysical evil, the evil, at the foundation of reality itself. But now we come to empirical evil, which is probably what most of us think of when we hear the word evil. The suffering, the pain, the disease, the destruction we actually see and experience in the world, both physical and psychological, and all the injustice and harm.
The stuff that makes headlines.
Exactly. And although some pain can be useful, like when it warns us about danger, the actual feeling of pain itself is usually considered bad.
Yeah, nobody enjoys suffering.
And for many philosophers, this empirical evil is seen as a consequence or a manifestation of that underlying metaphysical evil we were talking about.
It's like the metaphysical evil bubbles up into the world we experience.
And it's interesting how those same four theories we talked about, absence, privation, matter, and real property, they can also be used to understand empirical evil. Like, an absence theory of empirical evil would say that it's a lack of things like pleasure, health, justice, well-being. A matter theory might blame it on the inherent instability of the material world, the way things decay and break down. And the privation theory would say it's the absence of good that should be there, like someone not getting the medical care they need.
Makes sense.
The real property theory, though, gets kind of tricky when we apply it to empirical evil, especially within a religious context. Well, it suggests that things like pain and suffering aren't just absences of good, but actual, realities in the world. Leibniz, a philosopher, actually suggested that even pain is a kind of perfection in a way, though he was quick to say that God doesn't experience it. But this brings up some tough questions.
Oh, yeah. Like, if God is the source of everything, does that mean God is somehow the source of suffering, too?
Yeah, right. And some theologians today even embrace the idea of a suffering God as a way to deal with this.
I could see how that would be appealing to some.
And then there's the issue of things like severe mental illness, which cause so much suffering and can sometimes lead to really awful actions.
Yeah. Like, how does the concept of divine creation apply to those situations?
It makes you think about the nature of good and evil in a whole new light. All right, we've talked about the kinds of evil. Now let's move on to the origins of evil. Where does it come from? Philosophers generally talk about three main sources: natural evil, moral evil, and, well, spooky, non-agential evil.
Okay, spooky. Let's break those down.
Let's start with natural evil. This is evil that just seems to arise from the way the natural world works. Things that no one is really responsible for, like the limitations of being finite, or diseases like cancer that are caused by random mutations or natural disasters.
The things we can't control, essentially.
Right. It's like the suffering and destruction are just built into the fabric of the world. Then there's moral evil, which comes from the choices and actions of people, acts of cruelty, injustice, wickedness.
The things we can control, at least theoretically.
Right. And Augustine's idea of original sin fits in here, where a moral choice in the past had these huge consequences that messed up human nature and led to more and more bad choices.
The domino effect of sin.
Exactly. And Kant has a very different take on moral evil. He talked about this propensity to moral evil. He thought that there's this basic tendency in us to put our own self-interest above what's morally right. It's not just about doing bad things, it's about a deeper flaw in our moral compass, so to speak.
A kind of moral corruption at the core of our being.
Right. And it's important to note that this isn't quite the same as how we often use the term radical evil today, which is usually about really extreme acts.
Gotcha.
And it's also interesting that moral evil, from a philosophical perspective, doesn't always have to cause actual harm. Like the source mentions victimless crimes, things that are considered morally wrong, even if they don't directly hurt anyone.
Like, I don't know, thought crimes or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Interesting.
And just like with the kinds of evil, those same four theories, absence, privation, matter, and real property, they can also be applied to the origins of moral evil, focusing on how the will can be directed towards good or bad. But as Kant pointed out, explaining why we choose evil is really hard.
It's a deep philosophical question.
He basically thought it was irrational. And while people like Augustine, with his story of the devil's fall, or early Islamic thinkers who sometimes blamed bad choices on ignorance, tried to explain it, the mystery of why someone would choose evil is still there. And it's this, I guess, unintelligibility of extreme moral evil that sometimes makes people use the term radical evil.
I could see that connection.
And then we have that third category, the spooky, non-agential evil.
Ah, yes, the spooky stuff.
This is the idea that evil can come from some supernatural force or a dark side of reality that isn't connected to any specific being or natural process. But the source says that this explanation isn't very popular with philosophers today.
They tend to prefer more, evidence-based explanations.
Right. They look for explanations rooted in either the natural world or human choices. But this spooky kind of evil often shows up in more dualistic views, where there's this sense that the universe itself has this built-in malevolence, this darkness that exists regardless of what we do or choose.
It's a chilling thought.
It is. And the source makes it clear that these different origins are usually considered to be mutually exclusive when we're thinking about the ultimate cause of a specific evil, though there are some more, I guess, nuanced views that try to combine them.
So you can have a situation where a specific act is a moral evil, but the person's capacity for that act could have natural causes, like biological factors.
Yeah. And it's also important to remember that the term natural evil can be confusing because sometimes it just refers to empirical evil, like the stuff we experience, rather than to its specific origin.
I see how that could get muddled.
To make it all a bit clearer, the source has these visual aids, figure 1 and figure 2, that show how all these categories overlap and gives examples.
Visuals always help.
Right. They really help to untangle the relationships between these different ways of categorizing evil.
It's a complex web.
Yeah. All right, so now that we've laid out these basic distinctions, the source goes into some more puzzling cases of evil, cases that are harder to fit into those neat categories. And the first one is systemic evil.
Okay, systemic evil.
This refers to evil that's embedded in whole systems. Governments, corporations, social structures like racism, even academia.
Oh, yeah. Academia. I see that.
It has very real, concrete consequences, but it's spread out in a way that makes it hard to trace its origins back to just nature or spooky forces or even entirely to people's bad choices.
Yeah, like Who do you hold accountable when the whole system is corrupt?
Hannah Arendt's work on totalitarianism is really helpful here. She argued that these systems create evil on a scale that goes beyond the blame we can put on any one person.
So the evil is bigger than any individual.
Right. And even small acts of going along with the system or just not doing anything to stop it can contribute to horrible outcomes.
It's like a collective failure.
The source uses racism as an example. It's not just about individual prejudice, but about these deeply embedded structures that perpetuate harm, even when people aren't actively being hateful.
Like it's built into the fabric of society.
Exactly. And this leads to the argument that just being not racist isn't enough. We have to be actively anti-racist, working to dismantle these harmful systems.
It's about taking responsibility collectively.
And even then, as Richard Rothstein has shown, the legacy of past injustices can continue to affect us. Like, think about the lasting impact of slavery in the U.S.
Right. The echoes of past evil.
Exactly. Okay, then we have symbolic evil. This one's a bit more subtle, but really interesting.
I'm intrigued.
It's about how objects or actions can have a negative value that goes way beyond their actual physical properties, because of what they're associated with.
Like a haunted house.
Yeah, kind of. Like, think about a family heirloom. Its value is largely symbolic.
Right, it's sentimental.
Exactly. But symbolic disvalue happens when something is connected to a dark past, like the example of a factory-farmed chicken sandwich.
Oh, yeah.
It carries the symbolic weight of animal cruelty and
It
exploitation.
makes you rethink your lunch.
It does, and the source makes this distinction that we usually reserve the term evil for symbolic disvalue when it's really extreme.
So stepping on a flag might be disrespectful, but it's not necessarily evil.
Right. But if you had something like, I don't know, soap made from the remains of Holocaust victims,
Oh, God, that's horrific.
that evokes a level of symbolic horror that feels like it contaminates even people who are just indirectly connected to it.
Like the object itself is tainted.
Exactly. And it's really hard to fit this kind of evil into those neat categories of metaphysical, empirical, or natural, moral, spooky. Is it about the object itself, or the intentions of the people who created it, or something else entirely, like the historical trauma it represents?
It's a complex interplay of factors.
Right. The source talks about this concept of taint and the need for dissociation, like a symbolic act of rejecting that evil association to try and avoid being morally implicated, even if we didn't have anything to do with the original evil.
So it's about actively distancing yourself from the taint.
And finally, we come to radical evil. And the source points out that the way philosophers originally defined radical evil, like Kant's idea of choosing self-interest over morality, isn't really how most people use the term today.
So what do we mean by radical evil now?
It's usually about acts of extreme evil, things that are so horrific they defy easy explanation.
I see.
Aren't even before her famous idea of the banality of evil thought that radical evil went beyond just treating people as tools. She saw it as making human beings superfluous, as if their lives had no value at all.
That's chilling.
It is. But Karl Jaspers, another philosopher, stuck closer to Kant's view, emphasizing that evil ultimately comes from our freedom to choose. He also warned against making evil seem too exotic or otherworldly, because it might prevent us from seeing our own potential for doing wrong.
Makes sense.
And the source outlines 4 ways that people commonly understand radical evil today.
Okay, 4 ways.
The first is as a major violation of moral law. It's similar to Kant's idea of turning away from what reason tells us. Like, why would someone knowingly choose what's wrong? It's puzzling, but also, sadly, something we see all the time in smaller ways.
Yeah, we all make bad choices sometimes.
The second way is even more disturbing, the idea of choosing evil just for the sake of it, not even for some twisted idea of a greater good.
Like pure evil.
Yeah. Sometimes people bring up Augustine's story of stealing pears as a teenager. He did it just because he knew it was wrong, or the confessions of some serial killers. Kant wasn't sure if humans were capable of this diabolical kind of evil, but Dostoevsky explored it in Notes from the Underground. And this really bothered Jaspers because it just didn't seem rational.
It's the ultimate unintelligibility.
Right. The third way is seeing radical evil as a total rejection of moral law, like in slavery and genocide, where a whole group of people are denied their basic humanity. This isn't just making a bad choice within a moral framework, it's rejecting the whole framework.
Destroying the very idea of right and wrong.
The source uses the analogy of not just making a bad move in chess, but crushing your opponent's pieces. The Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, who thought he was beyond good and evil, is a terrifying example. And this kind of evil really disturbed Jaspers.
I can understand why.
And finally, The fourth way it links radical evil to systemic evil,
Hmm.
especially those really big, deeply rooted forms that could potentially make humans irrelevant.
Like, could technology make us superfluous?
Right. Like, could AI or automation get so advanced that it basically pushes humans out of the picture?
Wow.
These systems have very real impacts, but it's almost impossible to say who's responsible. And that connects back to Jasper's concerns about how hard it is to hold anyone accountable when evil happens on such a massive scale.
So we've come full circle.
Right. We started with that gut feeling that some things are just plain evil, and then we looked at how philosophers have tried to understand that feeling.
We unpacked a lot of concepts.
We did. We explored that key difference between evil as a state of being and evil as something we experience, and we looked at whether it comes from nature, our choices, or something even weirder.
And we saw how even those initial frameworks we talked about, while helpful, struggled to explain the messiness of systemic evil, symbolic evil, and radical evil. It shows just how complicated and disturbing the idea of evil really is. It's not a simple label, but a whole concept with a long and complicated history.
And hopefully, by listening to us talk about all these philosophical ideas, you now have a better understanding of the things that make us use that word, evil.
You've got more tools to work with now.
Exactly. Knowing about these different kinds and origins can give you new ways to look at problems in society, or even your own choices, and the human condition in general. It's about satisfying that human need to understand, even when we're faced with the darkest parts of our world.
So as you keep thinking about all this, here's something to consider. In a world that's becoming more and more interconnected, and with technology changing so quickly, how do we need to update our understanding of evil?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And given this ongoing debate about whether evil can even be understood, does trying to understand it make us more likely to accept it, or is it necessary if we want to actually fight it? And finally, which of all those ideas about evil we discussed, which one resonated with you the most? Or maybe which one disturbed you the most?
It's something to think about.
Definitely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.